Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dan, the voice behind ThatKaitoDan, and much like these lot, RWBY has a particular positive that it can boast proudly. No matter how you feel about certain factors like the story, the cast, and the visuals, pretty much most folks will agree in saying the music is one of the series' biggest highlights. Over the course of the series' lifetime, we've been blessed by some fantastic music, and the works of the Williams family alone has helped win over fans and fresh faces alike with their numerous grade A vocal tracks. But while these songs are rightfully deserving of praise, I'm one of many who also think that the episode scores and the people who make them should be applauded for the quality they bring too. The likes of Alex Abraham, Steve Goldsheen, Mason Lieberman, as well as Jeff himself, have managed to craft a wide variety of musical pieces that has truly helped bring the best out of the emotions and themes present in the events on our screen. And I feel it's time to give some love to the background tunes behind the highs and lows of RWBY. Though trust me, this was not an easy task. In fact, this was originally going to be a top 10 list, but with so many tracks to pick and choose from, it was hard to narrow things down to just a list of 10 worth discussing my love for. So, here we are with a top 20 instead. This did mean that I had to implement a couple of rules and regulations to aid me in trimming down my shortlist, so let's cover the groundwork first. The big rule I immediately set out was only looking at tracks that were officially released via the volume soundtracks. This includes the full episode scores from volumes 1 to 4 and the smaller excerpt tracks that became the norm around volumes 5 and 6. No tracks that were released separately via the SoundCloud were considered, and I'm also only looking at the main show pieces. This means no scores from the trailers, the shorts, or from side material like Chibi and the World of Remnants. In terms of my judging criteria, I looked at not just how great they are as standalone pieces, but also how well they were utilized within the scenes they feature in. After all, the purpose of an episode score is to elevate the visuals and aid the narrative through musical accompaniment. That being said, I'm about as musically insightful as a sponge. I can pick up certain elements and instruments fine enough, but I'm also a novice when it comes to analyzing and discussing music compared to more experienced types. In the end, these are just the tracks that I personally feel are my favorites, and I want to give each of them and the music team their well-earned love. So of course this also means that my list will be different to yours, and you're more than welcome to share yours in the comments down below. But enough grandstanding, it's time to let the performance begin as I unveil my top 20 favourite RWBY score tracks. Fittingly enough, we start this list with the show's first ever episode. Beginning with a slow piano and strings piece supporting the narration, this mellow tune sets the mood very quickly, as the gloomy vibe fits the dark nature of Remnant's past, while still being gentle enough to represent humanity's hope on top of letting the narration take center stage, before flowing quite nicely into what would soon become the theme of a certain fan fave criminal. Roman's leitmotif is probably one of my favorites, because you'd think a suave, charismatic lawbreaker like him would have something more colourful than tempered violins. And yet, they work, since Roman's the kind of person who prefers scheming over getting his hands dirty. It's only once he's serious does the pace pick up, as seen with this tussle with RWBY, before Glinda and Cinder's magical back and forth tosses in some bonus excitement in faster instrumentation that helps these two stand out as stronger, more skilled fighters compared to our fledgling huntress. Top it all off with some charming melodies during the chat with Ozpin and on the airship, and you have a delightful addition to the series' debut chapter that paved the way for future scores to continue the quality. Despite being in a rather memorable kickoff to the Mountain Glen arc, the score for the Volume 2 episode Search and Destroy I feel is pretty underrated. It's not perfect, mind you, as the thick war drums during Team RWBY and Oobleck's flight into the ruined city doesn't quite fit the scene in my opinion. But even with that issue, there's still some neat composition details that helps this piece just make it into the top 20. For starters, when the girls each get a moment in the spotlight taking out some grim, the music has small instrumental changes to fit their respective fighting styles. Yang gets explosive horns for her blasting beatdowns, Blake has Asian-styled instrumentation for her ninja slicing, Weiss has a fanciful flute as she gracefully skates on by, and RWBY has the music land beats in tandem with her sniper shots. However, I think the standout part of this track is during Oobleck's question time period, as the tempo takes a noticeable decrease, though not without purpose. Via a laid-back guitar performance, the low tempo helps direct our attention to what's being discussed, the tone supporting the personal motivations while also keeping in mind that they are still having some moments of action going on. By retaining the usual instruments that's found in the action scenes for RWBY with just that tonal tweaking going on, it keeps the score feeling balanced as a whole without a melody change causing whiplash. And it's one of many examples of perfectly blending in the music to the direction of the scene, no matter the setting. When it comes to score pieces centered on action, you not only need to match the intensity and velocity of the fighting, you also need to help the visuals tell the story, where dialogue is now absent or less frequent. This way, the audience can best tell who's in control and what emotions are bubbling underneath, which, when done well, makes the fighting feel that much more gripping and worth investing in. A good example of RWBY doing this would be the score for episode 6 of volume 2, Extracurricular. Pyrrha's exhibitions with Team Cardinal and Mercury each get a backing track that perfectly describes the momentum of the action as it happens, as well as the thought process of the combatants. With Pyrrha's lovely curb stomping of the douche canoe bullies, the tune eases you in with a gentle start, watching a composed Pyrrha prep for battle, before suddenly sprinkling in snippets of combat backed by quick, meaty drum beats. It may not seem like much, but blending in those different paced harmonies makes a note of Pyrrha's focused mindset when she's about to fight, something that's a key directive feature for the fights to come. In terms of the 4-on-1 bout itself, it mixes up different paced percussions, strings and horns to create a tense track keeping up with the electric action and Pyrrha's firm hand of control on the fight, ramping up the heavy sounds for when the tide turns slightly against her, as well as with every instance of Cardin growing more and more frustrated, with special mention as well to the neat beat timing with the shield attack and the higher tempo horns as Pyrrha goes in for the kill. And speaking of kill, we then have the Amazons' one-on-one fight with the assassin Mercury, where this time it's less a battle of strength and more a battle of wits. We have two individuals who are taking things slow, so a much more methodical pace to the backing track is required. The music only amps up when the two come to blows, and when they don't, we instead have little to no music or the use of light drums, tambourines, and what sounds like maracas to help keep the energy alive and let the sting of the latest attack leave an impact. The fight demands you take focus of Mercury's scouting, and the music does its very best to let every coming of blows feel important to benefit his secret goal, creating a crisp, atmospheric tune that cements the score's placement on the list. This shouldn't be a surprise. At number 17, it's the score from what most people consider to be the first episode that really grabbed their attention: Players and Pieces. If I can sum up this track in a few words, it would be something like mix and mash, as it's got a little of everything, and most, if not all of it, is top stuff to listen to. Thrilling action pieces, jovial cartoony symphonies, and even a small bit of Nora singing. What's not to love? It's quite impressive actually just how smooth everything is, even when switching tempos at such a speedy pace. Keep in mind that there is more to this episode than just the iconic Grim battles. We also have slapstick with Jean and Nora, a moment of calm for Weiss's chance to clear the air with RWBY, and the closing piece of incoming trouble with Torchwick's scheming. Though, of course, the tunes in amongst the action itself is definitely the track's prime material. The use of piano for Blake's swinging section, the kind of timing on the pomegranate move, and the kick-ass guitar throughout the entire final battle manages to form a fluid and stimulating battle track. There's also even a slight instrumental difference during each of the earlier 3 solo Grimm tussles that I found to really appreciate, as it makes each of the encounters feel unique up to the massive brawl, where a lot more instruments are used to give this particular fight more grandeur. The music team has shown time and time again that when they want to kick us in the emotional hard zone, they can do so with ease, and that was definitely the case with this part of Ren's tragic flashback. Following a soothing part 1 as we first grow an attachment to young Ren, his parents and his humble home, now comes this nail-biting theme backing all the terror taking place. And in just the scene with Ren and his father alone, you get a bunch of heartache that the music is able to amplify wonderfully. The horror the two share seeing their home in flames, and the sudden acceptance that Ren's mother did indeed die just seconds ago. Then there's the pain that Lee is pushing through to save himself and his son, only to crumple on the floor, and the slow realization that he is going to sacrifice himself to keep the incoming Nakalavi away from his son. It's all heartbreakingly moving, especially as Lee passes on his last words, and it comes with some lighter string work and percussion, though the track never forgets the destruction going on around them, so massive props there for being able to balance tender emotions with such a dark scenario. The best success of the piece though isn't the tragedy of the Ren family, but rather just how well it makes the Nakalavi come off as an absolute demon. We never see the beast in full view, but the heavy notes with every sighting of it just oozes a magnitude befitting something that's single-handedly wiping out this once peaceful town. And of course, we get the cherry on top with the slower rendition of Boop, the iconic track for Ren and Nora's bond for the birth of their connection. A sweet end to an otherwise haunting piece that helped us feel all the emotional turmoil the young lad from Kuroyuri once had to deal with himself. Even in perhaps RWBY's most flawed volume, the music team were able to craft some real gems, and while this next entry is one of the shortest on this list, it's hard to argue just how damn effective the score for the Haven Vault scene was, despite its brief runtime. Though it takes a few seconds to get to the real gold, once Cinder, Raven and Vanal reach the vault, that's when this score really shines, as a calming, otherworldly reprise of the Seasonal Maiden's theme welcomes us to this captivating location. The gentle notes falling almost as soft as the leaves from the vault's tree make sure you're in awe of the sight in front of you, but also unsettled for what's about to come. And every twist gets set up brilliantly with the music's aid. Once the low droning escalates bit by bit as Raven's attempt to backstab Cinder gets one-upped, the thriving music makes you think that this is another chilling serenade for a Cinder victory. At least until the music fades out, and while we feel the same confusion as Cinder, one of many neat narrative directions to this track, we soon realize that things aren't as clear-cut as they first seemed regarding Vanal, leading to a big fiery bellow of music once Raven's fake-out comes to light. And with those last few seconds, it's made apparent that Cinder's about to face one super pissed off, super-powered bandit, and it's going to be epic. There's also another good use of purposeful reused music beyond the Maiden's piece, as not only is the looming music perfect to fit Cinder's prideful boasting before her fall, the music is also reprising Lucis Naturae, the theme song attributed to the Grimm. On its own, it's a song that's still more than intimidating to fit the mood of the scene, but its Grimm connections tie thematically into the reveal of Cinder's Grimm arm. Little touches like that I freaking adore. I won't lie, a big reason why this track from Volume 3's first episode is here on this list is because of all the outside of the show emotions tied to the first scene. But that's not to say the rest of the track is lacking by comparison. In fact, it's actually just as good. As per usual for a season opener, there's a lot of stuff going on as the volume sets the story to come, and it leads into a bunch of wicked pieces, like here with the sports channel-esque lively intro celebrating the glory and importance of the vital tournament, complete with a sick guitar solo. There's also a playfully chipper melody at the noodle shop, highlighted by an awkward yet still silly tune for Nora's breakdown. One of many small ditties that helps welcome us back for another volume of RWBY in a very positive manner. Ironic that, given the way the volume ends, which has to have been done on purpose. But yeah, the scene stealer was definitely RWBY's moment at Summer's grave, that doubled as a fond thank you to the sadly departed Monty. It was an earnest and pure way to kickstart the volume, and the music was its own sincere, fond farewell piece. Some beautiful strings helped give this warm aura to the scene, making sure even in this moment of sadness, we're still keeping pleasant thoughts of Monty in our mind, while Ruby's keeping her smile up when talking to her mother about her friends and recent adventures. It's fitting as well that two of RWBY's vocal songs reprised here each add contextual emotions on top of being welcoming to hear in such pleasant fashion. Red Like Roses returns for another instance of RWBY at her mother's grave, and it's the perfect song to also use for this Monty tribute, as it's the song that came from his first bit of RWBY material, the Red trailer. Then there's also All Our Days, a song created by Jeff for his daughter Casey. It's a song built on fond memories of loved ones and the passage of time. All of this is a piece of music that touched my heart the moment that I first heard it. And to take a lyric from that second song, it will stay with me all our days, much like the wonderful man who started all of this. Sometimes all it takes is just one special element to make a piece of music hit all the right buttons. Case in point, the Grim Reaper track from Volume 6. At first, we got ourselves a very solid, slow build, quietly lowering our guard for the grand reveal of Maria Calavera back in her heyday. As we begin to realize who this masked woman is, the drums and strings kick up the tempo for the realization and for the gigantic Nevermore breaking out of the clouds, with the number that follows being all kinds of badass to match the legendary Huntress and her masterful decimation of the big bad birdie. But you know why this track is getting some appreciation here. When Tok and her cronies arrive on the scene, the pair of Jeff and Alex unleashes an aggressive backing track that goes from a 9 to a 10 with just one simple composition addition. The clock ticking away as the fight for survival unfolds, which adds a new layer of tension that few fight tunes in the series could top. And despite the painful climax of the bout, I truly respect that it's through this ticking going on that we the viewer start to really understand the true danger behind Tok's threat and how it ties to a semblance. Tok's limited invulnerability is not spelled out to us through some awkward throwaway line by one of the combatants, but rather with the countdown working in tandem with the pulse-pounding music and Tok not receiving any damage. It's that one directive touch, plus the fact that it ends right on the 60-second marker, that made a great battle tune become truly memorable. Okay, pop quiz. What's the first thing that comes to mind when I mention the premiere episode of Volume 2? Yep, the food fight, and the score from this scene is a big reason why this track is so high above others on the list, though it's not the only reason. Other scenes featuring mostly the bad guys also has strong musicality that's worth praising too. a lot of it is toned down violins and a murky drawl that establishes an air of unease, especially at the beginning for the suspenseful shakedown at Tuxin's store. Though its best usage comes during Cinder's first appearance. The staticky notes as she steps on screen silences both her associates' rising temper and the volume of strings tied to their bickering. Right away, this makes Cinder come off as the most dominating figure in the room, as the music is no longer about the group's infighting, but rather displaying Cinder's commanding presence amongst everyone else. Roman's no longer the top dog villain that we'll be watching, Cinder is, and this score went a long way in helping the vixen make an instant mark on the viewer. And that's just the positives outside of the food fight. You ever create a random tune in your head or hum something totally on the spot to make whatever you're doing sound more epic? That's pretty much how I would describe the score for what's up there as one of the best food fights put to animation. This scene is strangely grandiose, even though it's just some kids smacking each other around with fruits and veggies. But that's the real charm about it. It's something that's already topsy-turvy, ramped up to 11 by RWBY's iconic action flair and a rocking backing track. This isn't your typical food fight. This is a food fight jacked up on anime logic, and the music demands you take it as seriously as the students and the visuals are, by having orchestral music with loud booming drums, angelic choir chanting, and awesome reprisals of trademark themes, repeating what I said before about using different instrumentation to highlight the change in focused character. The magnitude the score is creating helps make even the most silly of moments feel cinematic, like RWBY screaming out "No" while holding a wounded Weiss in her arms. This then means that moments of actual epicness still has a backing tune that works for its occasion as much as it does for all the messy food silliness, like the tricked out closing melody of the theme from the Red trailer gaining a bigger rock guitar usage for RWBY's sick tornado move, which also made for a pretty cool tune for RT Animation's closing bumper. In a moment of rare serenity for the third volume, we have a deep score that's both relaxing and painful, as you'd expect for Chapter 8's Destiny. Starting with From Shadows in piano form for a very solemn tune right for Blake's reflection on Adam and how she hopes Yang's recent incident isn't a mirror of the same downward spiral she's seen before. This can serve as the first link in the chain connecting all three individuals together, and the piano being the lone instrument during this scene also allows the drifting notes to carry the concern and hope, in the words of a girl who is often shy when it comes to truly expressing herself. It's only when Blake's fears are discarded does some strings get added in to softly rise this to a happier sounding tune, at least as happy as things can be given the circumstances. The piano and strings then remain for Yang's next scene, but the latter instrument takes the lead this time, along with some brief flute playing, so the pair of Yang-focused scenes are now able to feel unique to one another, despite still featuring a less than chipper Yang. It's still keeping in mind what just transpired by remaining delicate in tone and pace, but instead of depending on the same melody, Jeff and Alex understand that Yang's chat with Crow regarding Raven requires a different, more personal vibe, befitting the long-standing emotions that Yang has towards her mother, so the thicker sounds works out nicely compared to the softer notes in the first scene. But if you want to talk about conflicting emotions, look no further than the scene with Pyrrha and Jean, which has probably my favourite version of the pair's leitmotif outside of the song Forever Fall. With all the confusion, pressure, and doubt spinning in Pyrrha's mind, you need a score piece that covers all these bases without sounding forced or overly dramatic. Thank goodness then that it's perhaps one of the most earnest excerpts in the entire show's score library. The innocent piano playing echoed by soft drones is symbolic of the weight on Pyrrha's shoulders and the desperate hope in her voice for Jean to ease her pain. Notice as well how the score gives just enough time for the notes to fade out, like it knows it's playing over one of the last few happy moments these two will share together, and, much like Pyrrha, it's clinging on for a desperate chance to let this moment last longer. You're welcome for me making this a more painful scene. Oh, and as if all that wasn't enough to make you cry and grab a pillow for comfort, the score goes for another drawn out melody, only this time with the mild instrumentation taken over by dense noise as RWBY realizes too late that she's unable to stop Mercury and his allies from causing more pain. It's such a gross tune, cause much like Mercury's smug smirk, it's almost celebrating the horrifying events that's about to happen. There's no more fluffy melodies, there's only the sense of danger on the horizon, and the music makes us wish for the luxury of the music that's been discarded. Just now we looked at the score focused on events after things first took a turn for the worst. Now let's share my love for the score from the episode that these incidents first took place in. The majority of the track from the episode, fittingly named Fall, has a big aim to make us feel just as uncomfortable as the central cast do, though not before starting out with a heavily dose of chimes for the storytime session about the maidens. Its light-hearted notes creates a sense of innocence just like many fairy tales told to children, an innocence that's soon broken with everything Pyrrha learns about Amber, the maidens, and the choice thrusted upon her. The atmosphere formed by the drawn-out violins and synth noises is absolutely suffocating, simply depressing, and the music does everything right to make us feel hooked to every second of it, thanks in large part to some of the best use of strings in the series yet. Notes hang in the air for a fairy tale story come to life in the most brutal of ways, while also giving the hollowed vault chamber and the secrets it keeps an extra layer of ominous sighs over the confused Pyrrha. Those notes dying off the deeper they echo down the giant halls makes Pyrrha feel so small by comparison. And after all the dreariness and panicking over Pyrrha, what follows is something that's a lot more positive. At first, that is Yang's clash with Mercury, and a backing track that does a lot more than just embody the hard-hitting nature of both combatants. In fact, it's actually quite the cunning ploy on the part of Jeff and Alex. Whilst our ears are focused on the blood-pumping guitar and drums, it helps the fight clear the slate in our heads of our previous worried emotions via the hypest of butt rock, complete with a metal remix of I Burn for Yang's comeback. With our minds stress-free and our energy levels high from the heated fight, the next emotional gut punch is open to land its next hit. The once victorious remix, now a soft, broken piano variant, as the episode ends with those worried, stunned emotions making a painful return. Twice the episode managed to lure us into a vulnerable state of comfort before some shocking heavy moments, and the score was a vital part in that deception. The events at the Brunswick Farms was rightfully praised for the quality found within. The recent tension surrounding the heroes and their newly gained truths resulted in some delicious character drama. RWBY was able to regain some of her urgency and fire as a leader, and this broken down pit stop was also home to one of the best Grimm in the series so far, the Apathy, a frightful new breed that struck fear into the hearts of the cast and us watching. And a big aid to their arrival's impact was the bitter music accompanying the swarm. Much like the build to their reveal, the music begins gradually, creating a false sense of security with just the faintest violin playing in the background, reminding us that there is something lurking in the shadows. And after the Apathy are properly introduced, what was once one violin is now many. A wave of sharp, ear-tearing strings, joined by some soul-shaking bassy clanging that swiftly ramped up the danger level now the monsters are in full view. Even though the creatures themselves aren't fast at all, what helps the nightmares gain an inescapable ghoulish presence is every pumping drumbeat and every gripping strum of the high-pitched notes. With it, it's almost like the Apathy's hands are reaching closer and closer to you, and no matter how fast you run or how valiantly you try to fight back, you cannot escape their clutches. The music is able to accommodate the chase scene's severity, even with the Grimm themselves lumbering compared to their prey. The score is tremendous at making sure you never feel a moment of safety, at least until the music takes a pause as RWBY focuses on her power. The only sounds playing being the notes echoing like raindrops in a cave shapes a reassuring, almost spiritual aura, matching both RWBY's meditative state and the faint chance of survival for those she cares about should she fail. And by making this one of the only bright moments in the track, it helps RWBY's first controlled use of her silver eyes become all the more powerful a moment, the only other heroic melody being a quick mirror mirror leitmotif use for Weiss's brave final blow. And even when the group make it out alive, the music isn't triumphant or positive. The now lone again violin doubles down instead on a raw tone. The gloomy frights from before still linger in everyone's mind as the team accepts their own faults in some of their recent internal conflicts. Rooster Teeth do a damn good job at horror throughout their many projects, and it was quite the ride seeing this proven once again here thanks to this truly hellish track. Yeah, it's a bit ironic this, that I go from talking about a theme centered on some Grimm to a track that's focused on its counter, the aptly named Silver Eyes, from the Volume 6 episode Dead End. Now I didn't put this piece this high just to make that cheeky tie-in. It truly deserves this placement, despite perhaps not being as deep as many tracks below or above it. But what it does have to its benefit is a comforting aura that feels natural to the mystical nature of the topic and the calming presence of the setting. With our long overdue first insight into this legendary power, the instrumentation goes for a dainty, flute-led backing piece, which resonates with the mood of curiosity and wonder carried in the scene, including the fond discussion from Maria about her past and her father. Seriously, those feather-light notes from the pan flutes, chimes and strings are so whimsical you can't help but feel drawn into it, while still being soft enough as well to not distract you from the very important discussion taking place, and yet you just feel like laying back on a cloud. And since this is a big chapter in RWBY's growth, we got more remix songs that's iconic to her, with the different instrumentation allowing these remixes of Red Like Roses and This Will Be the Day to have a fresh feel to it next to their past reprisals. Silver Eyes is just a simplistic score piece that with a straightforward change in instrumentation gains a new enchanting flair, warmly supporting its scene, on top of just being a damn beautiful piece of music. What's the best way to make a showdown with a lot of personal grievances involved feel even more tense? Slab on Western Twang. This is another entry on this list that achieves a great deal as a score piece, all thanks to a genre switch. While the usual type of instrumentation common in the series would have done just as well for this scene normally, having Yang's first confrontation with Raven be backed by a Wild West flavor guitar strumming fits the personal conflict involved and the roughhouse backdrop of the bandit camp. The tempered strumming and drumming at the beginning instantly sets the tone for this anticipated reunion, while still keeping note of the dangerous territory that Yang finds herself in. Though on the flip side, it doubles as great support for Yang herself, the restrained notes matching her confidence and the fact that she's making quite the statement by being led in by some of her recent punching bags. Adding extra intimidating swagger to Yang's posture allows her to feel on level ground, despite having only recently found the strength to get back in the game. The bulk of the pair's bantering has no music to it, which best suits the scene. That way when the music does kick back in, we can now see that things are about to get feisty. The music gets steadily louder and louder as Yang's patience wears thin, and we get a tie-in to her first tussle with the bandits, which also featured a western style to the score. After that brawl came to a close, Yang was able to confine her emotions, and the score reflected that by slowly dimming down to a low level. Here though, it's the complete opposite. Yang's losing her composure, her temper is raging, and she's now willing to fight an entire bandit tribe, including her mother, just to get to RWBY. This matters so much to her, and we can feel that through the pulsing of the percussion. And things only get more intense once Weiss breaks free, meshing her heroic tunes with the passionate emotions already found in the weighty drums and rapid string work. And though the fighting is cut off before it begins, at least the sudden drop to things makes the transition to the sweet reprise of Cold though nicer. After the winter break was over and we got our first new chapter of Volume 3 following the Yang vs Mercury madness, most of us expected the immediate fallout to be the focus of the next episode. Instead, we got a look at the origins of Cinder's faction and her fight with the then full maiden, Amber. The piece from that clash in particular has quite the interesting first few seconds to it, as it plays over, well, absolutely nothing. The episode has a few moments like these where there's only the dialogue and music at play, meaning with no visuals to contextualize what's being discussed, the score has to pull its weight and plant in our heads what kind of atmosphere these moments require. Good thing then that I believe the trio of Jeff, Alex and Steve were able to do so, forming a twisted tune that screams evil intentions. The dull ringing and grating notes makes for great contrast when paired up with the more angelic and pleasant sounds of the maiden leitmotif, introducing us to Amber back before she was left comatose. The timid string work sounds much more relaxing than the gross instrumentation that played prior to this, and it gives more reason to feel bad that this compassionate woman is about to meet a painful fate. Piercing strings and hard-hitting drums creates a resonance befitting Amber's struggle to survive and the ferocity of each individual's attacks. The flow of the music matches the same pace of the fight as well to great effect, and I can't help but feel like the drums replicate the rapid heartbeats such a scene draws out of those involved, let alone us watching. The highlights of the score though is without question the divine choir vocals adding in some virtuous anger to Amber's leaf storm, and the timing of the guitar with the lightning strikes for some extra violent fury. This is the first time we've seen maiden powers used in a fight, and such a moment demands an awe-inspiring tune for a never before seen power. Though the gravitas also helps add more importance to the fact that Cinder is able to match Amber blow for blow, and can even best the superpowered maiden on occasion. Once the fight takes a turn for the worse on Amber's part, the screeching takes over the other instruments, crawling in our ear like the same locust that's now draining her power. And to cap it all off, Cinder's familiar tune has its most empowering use, signifying her newfound might and the birth of her true dominance as a force to be reckoned with. Let's keep that pain train moving with a score from one of RWBY's darkest episodes, PvP from Volume 3. Dread, shock, confusion, malice, these are just some of the emotions contained in this episode, and with so much fear and concern set up by the previous episode, the music immediately carries on where it left off by crashing our senses with booming drums and tinny scratches, making you both excited to see the pair of clashes about to start, and also fear what could happen to the two redheads in their tourney bout. The techno-styled fight music makes sure to keep up with the pace of not just Pyrrha and Penny's agile attacks, but also the urgency in RWBY, to the point where, much like the Apathy track, every second feels vital. And it's only when we get to Penny's horrific dismemberment does the pace grind to a purposeful and sickening halt. The precise beats with every wire crunch, the pain screech when Penny's torso's ripped, almost like it's her final breath being gasped out in pain, and that last lingering boom as we see the broken pieces on the floor. This was one of the show's most darling characters getting destroyed right in front of us. The only sounds being a light droning backing a somber choir are enough on their own to make this moment tear at our hearts, let alone with these shocked and painful faces of the likes of Pyrrha and RWBY. But if that wasn't enough, we still got everything that follows. The appearance of rapid violins for Cinder's arrival quickly shifts to the tone for a worrisome vibe, making it clear that this is the moment that all her planning has built up to. That sudden realization and sense of danger is kept throughout every venomous word, every frightening sight to the grim, and even the reappearance of Neo and Torchwick, with the darkest version of their leitmotifs adding more chaos to this sinister score. And what truly helps this piece stick the landing is those epic choir vocals. You may not understand a single word that's being said, but damn if it doesn't just make this feel like the single most important moment in the show. And I swear the vocals in this shot alone makes me recall Joker's laugh scene from Batman Mask of the Phantasm. A moment to remember and a score to remember, more than worthy of making it into the top 5. Now, I like to think that I've got a wide palette when it comes to my musical tastes. It could be metal, country, pop or R&B, so long as it sounds good, that's more than okay by me. And that was certainly the case when the RWBY took the 2-on-2 tussle between teams RWBY and Funky and gave it some of that good old jazz flavour. This track isn't this high simply for using a different genre. It's easily one of the most bouncy and energetic tunes in the series, and its dedication to the battle's flow makes for excellent audio narration relating to every twist and turn in the bout. Sure, the OST release does include a tiny snippet of vocals from Neon's titular vocal track, but her supersonic insults towards Yang aren't the primary focus of this score piece, and it still highlights just how the mixing of club music and big band jazz strangely works. The lively electronic beats match the bubbly zing of the speedy Neon as she skates on by, while Flint and that fantastic impressive trumpet work helps solidify the pair's focus against the thrown off balance of our main girls. Plus you got Casey's wonderful scat singing, which, fun fact, she actually had a hard time nailing down according to Jeff. She even had to use an old Sesame Street episode to help her stop sticking to one sound, which just sounds all kind of charming. What really seals the deal though is, like I was hinting to earlier, the music matches the balance and the momentum of the fight. It kicks off with Flint's jazz and Neon's club tunes blending in perfect harmony as they overpower Yang and Weiss. And while Mirror Mirror gets jazzed up during Weiss's efforts to topple Mr. Cole, it's not enough to best Flint's killer quartet and their stronger horn work, which retakes the leading instrument role at least until a classic Casey high note backs the Snow Angel's sacrificial effort to protect her partner. This then leads into the jazz and a more familiar guitar blending together for a fiery remix of I Burn as Yang eventually overcomes the musical duo, turning their smothering energetic music into a final encore of horns and guitar for the Spitfire's victory serenade. And now we've reached the top 3, and my personal favourite of the finale episode scores, the second part of Volume 4's No Safe Haven. Coming right off the bat of the harrowing fight with good old Knuckles, the rest of the episode has probably one of the best consistent flows to a score in the entire series, which is quite impressive given all the emotional leitmotif it uses. The triumphant take on Bad Luck Charm and the piano during our first shot of Haven feels like a breath of fresh air after the grueling battle moments ago, and the stirring piano version of Boop for Ren and Nora's sweet moment together is a true delight. Even if you take out that romantic aspect, which why would you, the loving melody celebrates these two getting some deserved joy now they've overcome a demon of their shared past together. This then bridges into RWBY's pure-hearted closing thoughts and a seamless blending of 3 songs: Home, Cold, and the volume's opening theme, Let's Just Live. Each one alone is a treat for the ears already, but together they form an entrancing tune that helps put a nice cap on this current chapter of their respective characters' tales. RWBY's hope, Weiss's freedom, Blake's determination, Yang's serenity, John's regret, Oscar's uncertainty gets one last chance to cement their feelings and motivations that will lead into the future, and it's done so flawlessly that it intertwines these many story and character arcs probably better than RWBY's narration. It's the textbook example in my eyes of how to best embody everything that came before in the season and set the stage for what's to come in a pure and simple bundle worthy of my bronze medal. Some of you may not be surprised to see this up so high, though some of you might also be surprised that it's not number 1. I'm of course talking about Heroes and Monsters. Much like the episode itself, this track has definitely been perfectly ingrained into the fandom's memory, tying to many of its violent moments. It's a tune that's enriched with themes of hopelessness, discord, and misery, in amongst 3 big events at play: Roman and Neo vs RWBY, Blake's unhappy reunion with Adam, and the scene in Beacon's vault. These trio sequences have different moods and context given to them, yet despite the separate goals at play, they all still carry that sense of danger that ties them all together. Firstly, you got RWBY's race against the clock to stop the hacked Atlas forces, matched in the music's rapid instrumentation, largely overshadowed by Roman and Neo's most dominant version of their respective leitmotifs, as the criminal duo repeatedly trounce into Little Red, and the sounds of an ominous piano and creepy audio cues from Neo's semblance in effect ties it all together seamlessly. That overwhelming presence makes RWBY's plight come off even more desperate and punishing, therefore making the moment RWBY finally bests her foes to a chorus of horns and strings shine brighter, even amongst the constant perilous mood of the widespread attack. Then you got Adam's return, and even a heroic tone for Blake's valiant effort to stop him causing more harm doesn't stop her trademark theme, From Shadows, being warped into a slimy, creepy rendition, alerting us in the same vein as the previous bout over who's in firm control. The clashing of metal, the ringing of bells, and the rigorous violin work in the background is such a drastic change to the usual instrumentation of From Shadows that it adds a commanding aura to Adam's vicious threats. We've heard a lot about how this guy's very nature puts Blake on edge, and now the music is giving him all the power through the accompanying music. Then finally, there's the vault scene, where even though there's no fighting, it still maintains its level of importance and drama. In what should be the plan that helps turn the odds back in the hero's favour, the music doesn't sound inspiring like RWBY's Fight Back or the imposing techno tune for Ironwood's Shock Return. Rather, the unbearable dread, the sickly nature of the transfer, and this possibly being Pyrrha's send-off leads to the young girl's leitmotif returning for a distressing performance backed by a harsh choir. The fact it's so built up and agonizing is also another instance of the music team creating a musical sequence meant to distract us, as the sound rises in magnitude only for all of it to be quieting down very quickly. So much so we barely notice the change before Cinder's arrow pierces both Amber's body and the music altogether. And then, oh boy. The impact is sold outstandingly with a piercing, tingling sound, and then, much like Amber's final breath, the pacing drops to slow, faint, echoing beats, backed by a gentle yet fragile percussion and strings. Every horrifying moment that follows is allowed the freedom of little music to let the striking visuals crash into view. The lightning-quick violin for Yang's brutal dismemberment being the only exception, which still works as the last gasp of anything possibly turning out for the better. On any other day, it could have been number 1, but silver medal is still a deserved prize for a score that will last forever in the minds of the fandom. I mean it when I say this was so tough to call on who should top this list. In fact, I changed the top 2 rankings I think about 20 times before I made the final call. But in the end, one score bested them all, simply because it did exactly what I was looking for in terms of finding the track that, in my opinion, improves the episode's themes and story better than any other, on top of being an engaging and entertaining piece of ear candy. And that score is A Delicate Balance from Volume 6, Chapter 3. This episode was a lore nuke of epic proportions, but it's also a tragic tale of love, loss, and consequences between two figures we know of today as bitter enemies. and while the second half track, Our Creation, was also a strong candidate for this list, it was able to do so on the back of sheer perfection from the piece before it, which focused on Ozma's former lover, Salem. First off, let's give some more props to Casey, as she helped set the tone of the episode in fine form with her first credited work as a composer, creating the motif for the melody during Salem's rescue, which also featured Casey's glorious humming. Upon her rescue, the two's swift infatuation with each other is made heartfelt by a symphony similar to the end of any classic Disney fairy tale. But we get to see what happens after Happily Ever After, as the melody goes from delightful to mournful for the out-of-blue passing of Ozma. That sudden drop in tone represents so much of what becomes Salem's motives moving forward. The shock loss of the only thing keeping her going in life taken away just as easy as slowing down the tempo of the backing sounds. It's enough to make you feel bad for this woman, despite knowing who she is in present day, and by building that emotional connection to her with the score support, we somewhat understand her plight when Salem seeks the almighty gods in desperate aid. And boy do they make sure you feel the weight of her stepping into the domain of the gods. We've had choir vocals help amplify many a scene in RWBY beforehand, but the significantly bassier pitch in the vocals here gives both gods their deserved respect and power, with the God of Lights favouring a larger, holier touch compared to the more apocalyptic yet still revered theme of his brother. The roaring tones make you feel small against their stature, and gives every action they make all the towering presence they deserve, especially key for the inhumane ways they toy with life right down to the final nuking of humanity. Yet even with the music around this point befitting these two larger-than-life deities, it still manages to keep some very human emotions. When the God of Darkness feels resentment towards his brother, the tempo matches his jealous temper. And going back to Salem, despite her understandable frustrations at the gods for her curse and for the foul way they played with Ozma's life, you start to notice her theme's cadence has taken a notable shift. What was once a broken widow becomes a vengeful human seeking retribution against the gods, and the piano that previously played for her mourning now takes a sinister turn, our first musical sign of Salem's descent into a darker side. Perfectly encapsulated by the theme that Salem once held for her wholesome love, now stained by spiteful choirs, sickening violins, and furious horns once Salem becomes her grimified self. It's all so tragic, and I freaking love it. A score's job is to be that final piece of the puzzle to complete the storytelling, and oftentimes that's all it sets out to do. But Alex, Jeff, Casey, and hell, everyone who played a part in this track's creation produced something so fantastic as a narrative fixture that it could easily stand on its own 2 feet and enrich its audience just as well as the episode itself. So, after everything's said and done, a delicate balance is, in my opinion, not only my favourite RWBY score track, but is probably the best RWBY score track in the entire series. Whew, I can't believe it, but I'm finally done. As you can probably tell at this point, this was a monster of a project, and while I am glad to see it done and completed, I hope you understand why I did make this in the first place. I have a great respect for the hard-working folks who helped make RWBY what it is today, and hopefully my rambling will convince you to give some more love to them as well. Of course, this is just my list, and I'm sure you got your own favourites to share. So if you're not busy still rocking out to some of the vocal tracks, why not leave your thoughts in the comments down below. And while you're at it, please hit the subscribe and bell buttons, plus tick that notification box to make sure you get every new video from me as they drop. And follow me on Twitter at ThatKaitoDan for more on anything to do with future RWBY videos, updates on content for the channel, and more. But until next time, have a good day or good night, and peace out.